LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the October 9th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 14 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which would be an educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. The big topic, of course, all weekend, and the main topic on the Sunday morning news analysis shows was the surprise Hamas attack on Israel. Almost all of my clips will be covering that, and I'll have all of the news summaries from all of the outlets. I'll have a bunch of newsmaker clips talking about whether the Biden administration should be to blame for the surprise attack on Israel because of the funds that were unfrozen that went to Iran, and Iran is a sponsor of Hamas, and Hamas was responsible for the attack, and so it's like a triple responsibility link that Republicans are trying to get back to the Biden administration. So I'll have several clips on that. If you wait all the way to the end, I will have a clip of Representative Nancy Mace endorsing Representative Jim Jordan for Speaker of the House, which would be a really bad outcome to the loss of the weakest speaker in 100 years, Kevin McCarthy. That was the big story last week. That would have been the big story on the Sunday shows, the first Speaker of the House to be ousted by a motion to vacate in the history of the United States. That wasn't the top story. It was the surprise attack from Hamas on Israel. But I will talk about the Speaker of the House thing if you hold on all the way to clip 14. By the way, down in the video description, I have short summaries of all the clips, the sources of all my clips. If you want to read along and see clips 1 through 14, what's coming up. And if you're watching the recorded show, you can jump between clips, I guess. But anyway, I'm going to start with, this is war, so it's not really comic. There, like 1,000 Israelis are dead at this point. It's a huge terrorist attack on civilians from these Hamas fighters went. They killed hundreds of people at a music festival, just like shooting them down, went into all these people's houses and kidnapped men, women, and children to take back to Gaza as hostages. You'll see it all in the news summaries when I get to that. So I wouldn't really call this comedy, but this is like a really stupid question. I saw MSNBC Morning Joe panelist Caddy K ask the NBC chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel. He was in Sderot in Israel near the Gaza border, and he's like literally on the ground talking about incoming rockets from Gaza. And here's Caddy K's question that I thought was kind of dumb, that I don't know if it rises to the level of comic, but just a very stupid question over here.
Jump into that package because Richard Engel is live with us now. And Richard, you're there near the border. What's happening?
All right, Nico.
Same position.
Well, I can tell you right now, we are in the town of Sderot, and there has been a lot of incoming fire here. We believe that it is mortar fire. Some of them also appear to have been rockets. They've been coming in quite close. That is why we are on the ground right now. This is still considered a very active combat zone, even though we are inside Israeli territory. And it is not just the incoming rockets and mortars. There are also reports from Israeli officials of new infiltrations, of Hamas sending more fighters through breaches in the border fence. According to a senior Israeli official, there are about 30 different holes, breaches in that border perimeter, and most of them have been plugged up. Around 90% of them have been plugged up, but 10% remain. They're trying to secure them, but remain open. So this is still an active situation here. Most of the residents in this area have been cleared out, and the Israelis are trying to move people away from border towns and communities, and to try and also look for Hamas fighters, because they believe that cells, sleeper cells, or other fighters have infiltrated and are still in the area, potentially hiding in some of the buildings. And now maybe it seems like that big barrage that we just experienced has passed. They come in waves, but this one was practically right on top of us, right here in Sderot.
Richard, if any moment you and your crew need to move to get to safety, please do so. If you can speak to us and continue to speak to us, just to be clear, the mortar fire that you're hearing, it's not just then Israelis attacking Gaza. There are still rockets coming out of Gaza into Israel. Is that right?
Oh, 100%. There are rockets coming out of Gaza and mortars. We're very close to the Gaza Strip. In fact, the warning time, and you don't always get a warning. Israel has sophisticated air defense and air warning systems. From Gaza to here is only about 20 seconds. And sometimes, particularly with the smaller munitions like the mortars, you don't get a warning. We didn't hear a warning for very long before this latest barrage happened. So to answer your question, yes, there are still rockets and mortars coming out of Gaza. The Israelis are bombing inside Gaza. We've seen and heard Israeli jets and drones flying overhead, and the infiltrations are still underway.
In the past hour, there were
So yeah, Caddy K's question there, are there still rockets and mortars coming in from Gaza into Israel? And Richard Engel's like, yes, that is why I'm lying on the ground here. That's kind of how it seemed to me when I first saw that this morning, that was going to be my dumb question for my political comedy. But in addition, I want to play what I used as my political comedy clip back on August 14th. From the August 13th Fox News Sunday. This was what I called, I guess, the reverse cross-examination, or there was like a philosophy joke in here. I think I used something like Fox News' Shannon Bream gets slapped by Adam Smith's invisible hand, or because this is Representative Adam Smith doing what like I said, is called a reverse cross-examination. Usually it's the host who cross-examines the newsmaker interview subject, but here you'll see the interview subject totally dismantles the Fox News talking point, which is come back to the Republican talking point, that blaming Biden for this Hamas attack, because apparently these unfrozen South Korean funds are why this happened, according to Republicans. And for those who don't remember, here is that 4-minute dismantling of the talking point by Representative Adam Smith on Fox News Sunday back in August, as a reminder over here.
Okay, so I want to start with the Iran deal there. Again, as you heard the chairman just talking about, we've been told that there would be guardrails on this money, $6 billion that would flow through the Qataris. And so here's what Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said Friday. Warning us that they still have control of these people. They're still in custody, and adding this: the decision on how to utilize these unfrozen resources and financial assets lies with the Islamic Republic of Iran, telegraphing that they plan to do what they plan to do with the money. Money is obviously fungible. A lot of this re-invokes for people, which you heard the chairman reference there, the $400 million in cash that was then followed up by $1.7 billion, or excuse me, $1.3 additional billion in cash that went in a prisoner swap back in 2015 under President Obama. Some of the people we're now trying to get out, they were kidnapped or wrongfully imprisoned since we paid that money. I mean, do you believe the Iranians can actually change their behavior?
There's a fundamental misunderstanding about what's going on here. The money that's going from Korea to Iran is money from oil that Iran sold to Korea, and Korea did not pay for that, South Korea, because the sanctions that were imposed under the Trump administration. And there were about a half dozen countries in that situation: Italy, India, a few others. All of those other countries under the Trump administration have already given Iran that money with no strings attached under a special payment system that was set up under the Trump administration. South Korea didn't pay that money for complicated reasons in terms of how they wanted to transfer it. So money of this kind has already been transferred. This is money to pay for oil that was given to South Korea. This isn't some sort of frozen asset situation. So this type of money has already been transferred. Second, the deal has not been finalized. Qatar will control the money. So whatever the mullah in Iran has to say about it, it will be controlled by Qatar, not by Iran. So that aspect of it makes sense. We're still waiting to see what the prisoner swap looks like and to finalize the deal. But there's a lot more detail here that I think isn't being understood.
Yeah, but I mean,
the Trump administration transferred billions of dollars from these other countries back to Iran with no strings attached, and I don't hear anybody talking about that.
Well, in this current scenario, though, giving them $6 billion, and they will say it can be for medicine and for humanitarian needs. We know money is fungible, and there are real concerns that this amounts to an exorbitant ransom payment, critics would say.
But again, it's not, as I just said. Where were those real concerns during the Trump administration when money from a bunch of other countries was being transferred to Iran, no strings attached, no prisoners returned? So it just doesn't seem like a legitimate complaint based on the facts of the situation.
Yeah, so if there are people complaining now and they didn't complain then, very fair question for them. But let's do this. Let's talk about critics who say this actually is putting a bounty on Americans' heads. They include former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, involved with a lot of those discussions.
Right, and that is a fundamental misunderstanding of what this money is. Okay, it's not a bounty because we're not paying the money. It's Iran's money that was sitting in South Korea.
Withheld under
it's
sanctions.
Not a bounty.
Okay, well, let me play the Secretary and let you respond.
When I was Secretary of State, we had denied them wealth. They were down to just a little bit of money. The Biden administration's come in and upended all of that, and the Iranians will now be flush and their terror campaign more successful.
I mean, this is a country that chants death to America.
I understand all that, but that's completely untrue. Under Secretary Pompeo, these other countries, I'm aware of Italy and India, there were a few others that I hadn't found, money was transferred from them. Same situation, where Iran had sold stuff to these countries, sanctions kicked in, money hadn't been paid. Under Secretary Pompeo, that money was transferred from those countries to Iran, no strings attached. Okay, so it is not a bounty, and is factually incorrect what Secretary Pompeo is saying.
Okay, let's turn to Afghanistan.
Of course, she turns to Afghanistan because she can't really answer that. And by the way, Fox News Sunday and Shannon Bream had Mike Pompeo on yesterday, did not ask him about any of those things that Adam Smith said. You can see, I'm going to show a clip of Shannon Bream going after the Deputy National Security Advisor for the Biden administration about that $6 billion of unfrozen funds. But Mike Pompeo never asked about any of that. I just put a link to the entire transcript of Fox News Sunday in the live chat. You can see, even though Shannon Bream, even when talking to Adam Smith there a couple months ago, said, oh, well, we'll ask people about that. We'll ask those people making those claims about that. Never did. That's one of the reasons I wanted to play that again. But now I'm going to get to the news summaries from longest to shortest, starting with Fox News Sunday. They had both Trey Yingst reporting from Sderot in Israel near the Gaza border. And then they had Lucas Tomlinson reporting from the White House, but mostly about like what Republicans were saying, and Brett Baer's interview with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel weeks ago, just to show how like they were so close to peace and now it's all ruined. And I think Lucas Tomlinson's in there for spin. I mean, Trey Yingst has a very pro-Israeli spin. I mean, all the media you'll see very pro-Israeli. I mean, in some ways, it's since this was a terrorist attack and Israel was the victim. And I saw something in the live comments like, was this a terrorist attack because the Palestinians were defending their homes or whatever, like defending themselves from occupation? And there definitely is like a lot of complications and nuance to the story. It's something I've studied for a very long time. I've been to the Middle East a few times, not recently, but I've been to the Israeli-Lebanese border. I've studied the Palestinian occupation problem in university courses, and it's something I actually have paid a lot of attention to. I think you'll see when I get to my analysis here a little bit later. You can tell me whether you think I have the background to give that analysis. But I think you'll see here that Trey Yingst and all of the reporters are, giving a kind of one-sided. The U.S. media is really one-sided. But that's right. What I was saying is, when I said this was a terrorist attack, from Hamas on Israel. The reason I called it a terrorist attack wasn't because the attackers were from Hamas and the victims were Israelis, because it targeted civilians. That's like the definition of terrorism. If you target civilians, that's a terrorist attack. If you target civilians for, to achieve a political or military purpose, that's basically the definition of terrorism. That means that, like the U.S. bombing of Hiroshima, also is a terrorist attack in a way that I made a video about this many, many years ago. But I just wanted to talk about why I said Hamas was engaging in terrorism. It's because they targeted civilians. And anyway, I'll get back to more analysis after we watch the news summaries, starting with Fox News Sunday, Shannon Bream, Trey Yingst, and Lucas Tomlinson giving all the pro-Israel and the pro-Republican spin over here.
And hello from Fox News in Washington. Let's take a look at the broader region here, where these attacks by Hamas, coordinated, widespread, and by all accounts, a surprise to the Israelis and emanating from the Gaza Strip. Let's look at where the rockets, thousands of them, were fired from here into key cities like Tel Aviv. Israel, of course, has been responding with fire into the Gaza Strip as well. But it's not just in the air. On the ground as well, there were scores of attacks coordinated and unleashed. We've heard the stories. You've seen the videos, attacks going home to home in these communities, killing people, taking people hostage now back in the Gaza Strip, which creates a new nightmare for Israel, because essentially they know their citizens are being held there as they now fire back. Also this morning, there is a new front as to the north. Hezbollah has been exchanging fire with Israel. That's a new front. All of this comes as the Prime Minister has warned this is going to be a long conflict and not easily resolved. We have team coverage with Lucas Tomlinson at the White House and Trey Yingst on the ground in southern Israel. We begin this morning with Trey. Hello.
Shannon, good morning. A massacre of unimaginable proportions took place in Israel yesterday, with more than 600 Israeli civilians and soldiers killed by Palestinian militants, according to Israeli media. We do know those militants crossed into southern Israel yesterday morning on the backs of pickup trucks and on motorcycles. They went first to a music festival where they opened fire on the crowd. They then took over communities along the border between Israel and Gaza. At this hour, Hamas militants are still in southern Israel, engaged in gun battles with the military. At the same time they launched this assault, more than 3,000 rockets were fired into the Jewish state. Earlier today, Hamas militants infiltrating into Israel once again, where they were chased by security forces after stealing a civilian car. Take a look. Israeli security forces just pursued a group of Hamas militants that infiltrated from the Gaza Strip, stole a civilian car, and then headed north toward the city of Ashdod. You can see the car in the distance. It has bullet holes in the windshield, as security forces are concerned that at least one of these militants may have escaped and could be hiding in the area. Israeli tanks are headed toward the Gaza border right now, a clear indication that Israel is preparing for a ground invasion. We've also seen artillery units and special forces headed south. The biggest concern for Israel right now, securing the southern part of their country. We do know their second concern has to do with the hostages taken as prisoners of war by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Dozens of Israeli soldiers and civilians dragged both dead and alive into the Gaza Strip. Hamas says they are being stored in the tunnels underneath Gaza. All of this as Israel plans their response. You can see the soldiers behind me. They've been striking the Gaza Strip overnight and into this morning. And we do know they are now facing rocket and mortar fire from Lebanon, a multi-front conflict erupting in the region. Shannon.
Trey Yingst, our deep thanks to you and to your team there, keeping us updated around the clock. Thank you, Trey. Turning now to the Biden administration response to the Mideast crisis. Fox News correspondent Lucas Tomlinson is live at the White House with that part of the story. Hello, Lucas.
Shannon, speaking at the White House, President Biden pledged the full support of the United States and issued the following warning.
Let me say this as clearly as I can. This is not a moment for any party hostile to Israel to exploit these attacks to seek advantage. The world is watching, and let there be no mistake. The United States stands with the state of Israel.
Saudi Arabia's crown prince, the de facto ruler of the country, and Israel's prime minister both recently told Fox's Brett Baier their countries were approaching an historic moment, full diplomatic recognition for the first time.
If you were to characterize it, are you close?
Every day we get closer. It seems it's for the first time real one, serious. We're going to see how it goes.
We just got back from Riyadh. I know you heard those words from the Saudi Crown Prince. What was your response?
Well, I was delighted to hear what he had to say, and to borrow a phrase, I think we're getting closer to peace every day.
Now, Senator Tom Cotton says crushing this potential peace deal is exactly why Hamas launched its attacks on Israel, saying in a statement, quote, "This war is a transparent attempt by Iran to derail the peace talks between Israel and Saudi Arabia. The United States should provide Israel the military and diplomatic support it needs to destroy Hamas. And the Biden administration should cease all engagement with Iran," a point echoed by one of Israel's former prime ministers.
We're fed up with this hypocrisy. It's time for Israel to fight back. It's time for Israel to destroy Hamas.
Former Defense Secretary Mark Esper and Senator Lindsey Graham both called this attack an intelligence failure. Shannon?
Lucas, thank you very much. Joining us now, John Feiner, Deputy National Security Advisor with the Biden administration. John, thank you.
So, yeah, there you see that Fox News and Lucas Tomlinson was at the White House, and they played a brief clip of President Biden, but he was there, it seemed, mostly to give Republican and Fox News response. There was like the whole Tom Cotton and Mark Esper and all these Republicans who are criticizing the Biden administration. I don't know why you have to be at the White House to get that Republican spin, but anyway, I pretty much pre-criticized that clip, and now I'm going to get to the news summaries from the actual news organizations, starting with Kristen Welker on NBC News' Meet the Press. Here you can see her doing a news summary along with their reporter on the scene, Raf Sanchez, and I will talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Good Sunday morning. Israel is at war after Hamas launched a surprise multi-front attack from Gaza, which Israel says has killed more than 300 and wounded at least 1,500. The timing adding to the devastation. It is the largest attack on the state of Israel since the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, almost exactly 50 years ago. The bombardment began with thousands of rockets launched into Israel. Hamas gunmen used explosives to breach the border fence, crossing with motorcycles, pickup trucks, paragliders, and boats. Israel's military confirms both civilians and soldiers have been abducted, taken as hostages into Gaza. More than 300 people have been killed in Gaza in retaliatory strikes and nearly 2,000 wounded. This morning, the war threatens to expand as Israel exchanged strikes with Hezbollah in the north. The attack comes at a time of deep divisions and political instability in Israel. And as the U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia have been negotiating what would be an historic diplomatic agreement opposed by Iran. Everyone was caught off guard in a stunning intelligence failure from Israel to Washington, with one senior U.S. military official saying, "We were not tracking this." On Saturday, a flurry of urgent calls, President Biden speaking with Prime Minister Netanyahu.
The United States stands with Israel. We will not ever fail to have their back. We'll make sure that they have the help their citizens need and they can continue to defend themselves.
My colleague Raf Sanchez is on the ground in Sderot, Israel. And Raf, we see the disturbing images behind you. What is the very latest there?
Yeah, Kristen, I am standing in front of all that remains of an Israeli police station that was overrun by Hamas gunmen yesterday. This was the scene of a 20-hour, very intense gun battle as Israeli forces tried to regain control. And if my colleague Dave Copeland just swings the camera around here, you can see, Kristen, all over this scene, we are seeing cars like this in ruins. There is a boot from what may be a member of the Israeli security forces. And back there in the rubble, Kristen, all morning, we have been watching as they have been pulling bodies out of the debris. Under our feet are the shell casings, a sign of how intense the fighting was. And overhead, we are hearing Israeli fighter jets carrying out a punishing round of airstrikes inside of Gaza. But more than 24 hours on from this surprise attack, Israeli forces are still not fully in control on the ground. There are reports of continued fighting with pockets of Palestinian militants. And as we drive the highways of southern Israel, we are seeing all evidence pointing to a large-scale Israeli ground incursion in the works. We are seeing tanks and artillery being moved into position. Now, Kristen, that would be a complex military operation. But on top of that, it is a hostage rescue operation, unlike anything perhaps the world has ever seen. The Israeli military has now confirmed that there are both Israeli soldiers and civilians being held captive by Hamas, by Palestinian Islamic Jihad inside of Gaza. Some of the videos we have seen on social media are absolutely harrowing. A young woman who was attending a dance party in the fields near Gaza being carried away on the back of a motorcycle. Videos then showing her inside Gaza, but this morning her fate is unknown, along with the fates of so many other of these Israeli captives, these Israeli hostages. And you can guarantee, Kristen, that that is weighing very heavily on the minds of Israeli decision makers from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on down, as they try to figure out what is the best course of action to get these people back safe and to exact what Prime Minister Netanyahu says will be massive retaliation for this surprise attack. Kristen.
Those images just devastating. Raf Sanchez, thank you. Please do continue to stay safe. And joining me now is Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
And I will have a clip of Secretary of State Antony Blinken, not from NBC News' Meet the Press. I think I'm taking a clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. But because actually Antony Blinken was on all the news programs, and by news programs I mean news programs. He wasn't on Fox News Sunday, even though news is in the name, not really a news program. But Antony Blinken went on, the Secretary of State went on all of the other four. Fox News Sunday could only get Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiner, and I'll show that clip too. But let me continue through the news summaries. You saw Fox News Sunday, where they had the reporter on the scene, Trey Yingst, and then Lucas Tomlinson from the White House to give the Republican spin for no apparent reason. And then on Meet the Press, Kristen Welker and Raf Sanchez. Now we have ABC with George Stephanopoulos and their reporter, James Longman. Then we'll get to CBS News Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan, and their reporter, Holly Williams, and you can decide who did it best. But here's the ABC version, George Stephanopoulos and James Longman giving the same news yesterday over here.
Morning and welcome to This Week. All-out war has broken out in the Middle East, and all signs now point to a long and bloody war. It began with a surprise attack from Hamas nearly 50 years to the day that Israel was shocked by a surprise attack from Egypt and Syria that launched the Yom Kippur War. It came by land, sea, and air with paragliders, speedboats, motorcycles, and rockets. Hundreds have been killed, hostages have been taken. It's being called a 9/11 moment for Israel, and Prime Minister Netanyahu's promise that Israel will retaliate with a might and scale the enemy has not yet known. Overnight, Israel launched air attacks on Gaza. Tanks are rolling towards the border. The shock waves are spreading across the region and the world. Foreign correspondent James Longman starts us off from Tel Aviv. Good morning, James.
Yeah, good morning, George. I'm at a strike site in central Tel Aviv. You can see this building entirely destroyed. The cleanup operation has started. Cars all along the street completely destroyed as well. This just does not happen in an area like this. People are in shock. They should be enjoying their weekend. Instead, this is a country at war because the fighting is continuing in 6 locations along the border with Gaza, where Hamas militants infiltrated into Israeli territory. The images are truly shocking, taking people by surprise, killing them them on the spot where they found them. We now understand at least 500 Israelis have been killed and as many as 2,000 injured. Hostage situations are also ongoing, both here in Israel and in the Gaza Strip. Hamas says they've taken dozens of hostages, men, women, children, and the elderly. And that is going to further complicate Israel's response. Yes, we've seen airstrikes overnight, as many as 250 Palestinians dead. But will Israel send in ground troops? We've seen them amassing on the border with Gaza. And what will that do to the region? We've already heard this morning of an altercation between Hezbollah and Israel from Lebanon. And so there is deep concern about regional security. But make no mistake, this is the beginning of Israel's wider response. George?
And James, you talk about the shock right there. Some even calling this worse than the attack in 1973 that started the Yom Kippur War.
Yeah, George, it's extraordinary. I mean, I've been to this country already this year just 4 times for various different terrorist attacks and incidents. There's a level of kind of resolution that Israelis have come, sadly, to expect terror incidents in their country. This is completely different. Shock, sadness, complete desperation, really, seeing the images of these women and elderly people being transported on motorbikes and in cars over into Gaza. They want a resolution quickly, but that doesn't happen overnight anywhere in this region and certainly won't in this situation. George?
Okay, James Longman, thanks very much. Let's bring in our military analyst, Steve Ganyard. Steve, the big question, how could this happen? What a massive...
Okay, and I'm not going to go to the next person because that's not the reporter on the scene. I know I did give Fox News 2 reporters, but I'm not going to go to the military analyst. But I do want to juxtapose the ABC, George Stephanopoulos and James Longman, with the NBC News Meet the Press I showed previously with Raf Sanchez and Kristen Welker, and now you can see Margaret Brennan and Holly Williams, the 3 news organizations, since Fox News doesn't really count, but 3 news organizations with reporters on the ground giving their take on the surprise Hamas attack. I noticed, I think ABC was the only one to mention 9/11, like Israel's 9/11. I'm going to talk about that a little later in the program when I get to clip 13, the penultimate clip, where you're going to see the Ron Dermer, the Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs, talk about how it's like 40 times worse than 9/11 for Israel, and that's why no one should tell Israel what to do because, well, I'm going to criticize what Ron Dermer says when I get to clip 13, but let's finish the news summaries first and get to CBS News, Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan and Holly Williams doing the same news, but the CBS way over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. It has been a stunning week in Washington and overseas. Congress no longer has a Speaker of the House. Kevin McCarthy was ousted just days after appearing on this program. It is the first time in U.S. history that the House ejected its leader. In the Middle East this morning, the war may be expanding amid an exchange of strikes between Israel and Hezbollah as that militant group enters the conflict. The number of Israelis and Palestinians killed could exceed 900. We've learned several Americans are among the dead. It is unclear how many. For the latest, we begin with CBS's Holly Williams in Tel Aviv.
Hamas gunmen broke through the fence that Israel uses to contain Palestinians in Gaza. The militants, designated as terrorists by the US, fired waves of rockets into Israel and arrived by sea and even in paragliders. It was a complex and coordinated attack. What followed was a frenzied bloodletting. This Israeli soldier was apparently lynched on camera. Civilians were slaughtered on the highways and in the towns of southern Israel. And Hamas also took Israeli hostages, including women, children, and the elderly. They paraded some of them through the streets of Gaza, along with their other trophies, captured Israeli military vehicles. According to Israeli media, around 750 people are missing. What happened today has never been seen in Israel, said Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We will destroy them and we will take mighty vengeance. Israel's already targeted the Gaza Strip with hundreds of airstrikes. demolishing this 14-story building that it says was used by Hamas. But many here are demanding to know how Israeli intelligence failed to detect the planning for such a massive assault. It came almost 50 years to the day after the beginning of the Yom Kippur War. And there are echoes of that conflict when Israel was also attacked by surprise.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has warned Palestinian residents to leave the Gaza Strip. But Margaret, as we know, they are unable to do that.
Our Holly Williams from Israel. We're joined now by the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Herzog.
Okay, and I don't have that clip. I'm actually taking the Nancy Mace clip about the Speaker of the House race. That will be the final clip, clip 14 I'll show you. And I guess CBS News Face the Nation did start with the Speaker of the House story. It is a big historic story, would have been the #1 story if there hadn't been this surprise Hamas attack on Israel on Saturday, which of course is now the big story. But I don't know which of those of the three middle news summaries you think did it best, with the anchor at home, with the reporter in the field. I mean, they all definitely had pathos in there, like stories that made you have sympathy for the victims of these terrorist attacks targeting civilians. But which one did it best? Which one had the most pathos? Which one was most accurate? You can let me know what you think in the comment section. I'm going to finish off actually with the CNN State of the Union news summaries, but I don't have just one. I have three of them, because Dana Bash did so much extra work on Sunday. Most of the time, CNN State of the Union plays live California time, where I am, 6 a.m., and then they replay it as a recorded show at 9 a.m. Pacific time, where I am. But yesterday there was a 6 a.m., there was an 8 a.m. and a 9 a.m., all done live, all with like different interviews, and each one with Jake Tapper, when he started as host of State of the Union, he started this tradition where at the beginning of the program, the host tells you what is the State of the Union this week. And Dana Bash gave us 3 different ones. That's what I'm going to show you. They're all like 90 seconds to 2 minutes long. Dana Bash giving different news summaries at different hours. The first one, this is like, I was criticizing the U.S. media for siding too much with Israel. Well, Dana Bash kind of makes it explicit in her What is the State of the Union this week at 6 a.m. Pacific time over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the state of our union is standing with Israel. Breaking news just into CNN. Israel formally declared a state of war. And CNN is reporting more than 500 Israelis are likely dead after a surprise terror attack by Hamas. Today is the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah, one of the most joyous holidays of the Jewish calendar. People are usually dancing and celebrating. Instead, Israelis are in mourning the hundreds who were killed and looking for their kidnapped babies, grandmothers, sisters, brothers, and husbands, captured by terrorists in their streets and in their homes. Desperate parents are still praying for information about their children who are Hamas hostages.
I heard terrorists speaking in Arabic to my teenagers, and the youngest saying to them, "I'm too young to go there." It was like 16 and 12, so it was very, very hard to hear. And the phone went off, the line went off. That was the last time I heard from them.
As we speak, Israeli tanks are rolling towards the Gaza border. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warns of a long and difficult war to come. Joining me now is the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. Thank you so much.
And I will have a clip of Antony Blinken, but there you saw that Dana Bash actually started the CNN State of the Union program saying that the CNN network is standing with Israel, or that's our State of the Union standing with Israel. Like I said, pretty explicit. This is a little bit more neutral in the second news summary, where she tells us our State of the Union this week, 2 hours later over here.
News.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the State of our Union is praying for a quick end to a new war. We begin with breaking news. Israel's ambassador to the United States says dozens of Americans are among the Hamas hostages taken since the explosion of war in Israel. The State Department is closely tracking those reports. Here's what the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, told me.
We have reports that several Americans were killed. We're working overtime to verify that. At the same time, there are reports of missing Americans, and there again, we're working to verify those reports.
Coming up, we are going to ask a top Israeli official about those reports and, of course, the broader reality on the ground there, with hundreds of Israelis killed and many, many Israelis taken hostages. We're talking about more than 500 innocent men, women, children, grandmothers, sisters, mothers, husbands, brothers. It's left desperate families seeking information on their missing relatives, stolen from their homes and from their streets by Hamas terrorists. Today, Israel's cabinet formally declared a state of war. We're going to start here with General Spider Marks, who is at the Magic Wall, to give us a sense of where things are geographically. And
I kind of want to know why there's a general whose name is Spider. That was one of my questions after watching that. They never explained why his name was Spider. I don't know if I want to get the analysis of a general named Spider. But there you saw, like, praying for a quick end to the war was the second State of the Union of the week. And then just to round out and finish up all the news summaries, here's the third CNN State of the Union news summary from the third hour. Dana Bash working hard, also giving us some more pathos for the victims over in this clip.
Breaking news.
it is the top of the hour. I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the State of the Union is holding its collective breath. You are watching a special live hour of CNN breaking news coverage, Israel at War. A top Israeli official just told me that more than 600 people are dead and more than 2,000 are injured after Hamas terrorists swept into Israel. Several Americans are reportedly dead, and an Israeli official says dozens of Americans are among the hostages brought back to Gaza. We are talking about hostages who are largely civilians: mothers, fathers, children, grandmothers, sisters, brothers. Now, 36 hours later, Israel has formally declared war and is still battling to clear Hamas terrorists from inside its own borders. Watch this heart-stopping video of a firefight in the middle of a highway. Hundreds of videos are being seen across social media showing the world the horrors of this attack. And in response, Israel is retaliating against Hamas in the form of relentless bombing on Gaza cities. We want to get some perspective now from some Israelis who are living through this terror. Esther Marcus is a resident of a kibbutz located near the Gaza border and joins me now. Esther, thank you so much for being here. You are currently on a bus with your family, evacuating.
So yeah, there is the last of the news summaries. Dana Bash did it 3 times, and not with a reporter on the ground. I'm not sure why CNN didn't have a reporter on the ground for their opening segments, but anyway, you can tell me which of the news summaries you think was best, which covered the breaking news and the rest of the news from the week. It probably was CBS, I think, put it all together the best, but anyway, you can let me know what you think in the comments section. And now I'm going to get to my newsmakers first. Like I said, a lot of the newsmakers I'm going to use to rebut this Republican talking point that somehow the Biden administration is responsible for this surprise Hamas attack on Israel because they're too weak on Iran and they gave $6 billion of unfrozen funds to Iran that I showed that clip from August where Representative Adam Smith kind of demolished that Republican talking point, but that doesn't mean that Republicans didn't try to resurrect the zombie lie, as Bill Maher called it. I think Bill Maher coined the zombie lie term, which is like lies that won't die, even though they've been debunked for many, many times. And here's Anthony Blinken over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos trying to debunk the talking point again, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
As you know, many in the GOP are laying blame on the Biden administration in the wake of that recent deal to unfreeze Iranian assets that were unfrozen for humanitarian purposes in return for the release of those American hostages. Here's what Steve Scalise, one of the candidates for Speaker, put out yesterday. The Biden administration must be held accountable for its appeasement of these Hamas terrorists, including handing over billions of dollars to them and their Iranian backers. Your response?
Well, look, I'm not going to comment on specific comments by individuals. I can say this. It's unfortunate that some are, in effect, saying things that may be motivated by politics at a time when so many lives have been lost and Israel remains under attack. And the facts are these, and should be well known. This involved Iranian resources, not American taxpayer dollars. These were resources that Iran had acquired from the sale of its oil that were stuck in a bank, in this case in South Korea. They have always been entitled to use those funds under our law and under our sanctions for humanitarian purposes, and the funds were moved from one bank to another to facilitate that. By the way, not a single dollar from that account has actually been spent to date, and in any event, it's very carefully and closely regulated by the Treasury Department to make sure that it's only used for food, for medicine, for medical equipment. So some who are advancing this false narrative, they're either misinformed or they're misinforming, and either way it's wrong.
Are we in for a long war?
Or maybe they're misinformed and misinforming, because, that talking point has been all over Fox News. And here you can see the Deputy National Security Advisor, John Feiner, also debunking it on Fox News. That doesn't mean that Mike Pompeo didn't come on later and again try to resurrect this zombie lie, even though, as you saw earlier in the program when I showed that Representative Adam Smith clip, the second clip where he pointed out that the Trump administration gave a whole bunch of money to Iran, unfrozen from Italy and other countries that where there were no hostages as part of that deal. They just unfroze the money for free. Anyway, here's John Feiner making the point on Fox News Sunday with Shannon Bream over here.
And a number of administration officials have been clear to come out and talk about the $6 billion in Iranian funds that were recently unfrozen, saying not a penny of that has been spent. It would not have had any way to flow into this particular conflict. But the Wall Street Journal editorial board, when news of that unfreezing came, said this: what stands out in this deal is a $6 billion ransom. They refer to the Secretary of State. They say, though Mr. Blinken says it will only be available for humanitarian trade like food and medicine, the reality is that the waiver now frees up funds for Iran's nuclear program, terrorism, and proxy wars. Your response?
Look, we've been quite clear that we just have a fundamentally different view of this situation, and that we believe those criticisms are not well-founded and frankly inaccurate. Any implication that money that has not yet been spent, not a single dollar of that money has yet been spent, it had any role in the attacks that took place, in planning them, in equipping the parties that conducted them, just frankly doesn't make any sense. And as we've been clear, that money can only be spent on humanitarian items, on food, on agricultural products, on medicine, that sort of thing. We're going to be watching that very closely as well. And if Iran spends that money in ways that it's not supposed to, we will know. And so I think the facts are quite clearly on our side of this debate.
But if Iran knows it's getting $6 billion worth of breathing room, is it not fair to assess and have a conversation about whether they then would think the funds they do have in-house that are already at their disposal could be spent in nefarious ways.
We expect that this money is only going to be spent over a fairly extended period of time, years, not weeks, not months, and that spending money on stuff, food items, agricultural products, medicines that benefits the Iranian people, but that does not benefit the Iranian military is frankly not related to the discussion that we're having today.
Well, the people there certainly need that relief and that help. Let's hope that it does get to them. I want to ask you, too, about what you heard Lucas talking about, the negotiations, the conversations between the Saudis, U.S., Israel that have been ongoing.
And yeah, so that's on to a different topic. I just wanted to show the whole back and forth. Shannon Bream apparently didn't learn very much from her August 13th interview with Representative Adam Smith when he explained this to her very carefully and in depth. And like I said, Shannon Bream did an interview with former Trump Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in that same Fox News Sunday program yesterday and never brought up any of that, nothing about the Trump administration unfreezing funds and giving money to Iran that Adam Smith brought up here. Like I said, for the live comments, I just put that transcript to Fox News Sunday. You can see the total lack of cross-examination of Mike Pompeo on how the Trump administration might be responsible for funding Iran. But I want to now move on to NBC News Meet the Press, where Kristen Welker had on Nikki Haley, who was the Trump UN ambassador. And you'll see first tries to point out to Nikki Haley that there's no evidence for this whole Republican talking point that the unfreezing of the $6 billion worth of South Korean oil money had anything to do with this Hamas attack on Israel. And Nikki Haley never really admits it. And then Kristen Welker, to her credit, does what Shannon Bream never did, asks a Republican from the Trump administration about how the Trump administration might not have done a great job on trying to solve the Palestinian problem. They moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, which created a lot of problems with Palestinians, and then they didn't really do much to make progress on the two-state solution, where Palestinians actually get to have self-determination and rule the parts of Israel/Palestine where they live. And so, like, this is what Shannon Bream should have done, is what Kristen Welker did with Nikki Haley, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
I want to drill down with you on some of those divisions. Yesterday, almost all of your Republican rivals blamed the Biden administration for this attack, as I just discussed with the secretary, citing the deal they made with Iran. You just saw the Secretary of State effectively say there is no link between that deal and the horrific attacks that unfolded yesterday. Do you think it was irresponsible of your rivals to level that allegation without any evidence or proof?
I actually think it was irresponsible for Secretary Blinken to say that the $6 billion doesn't weigh in here. I mean, let's be honest with the American people and understand that Hamas knows and Iran knows they're moving money around as we speak because they know $6 billion is going to be released. That's the reality. When I was at the United Nations, you saw that when those planes full of cash sent by Obama to Iran, I went to the International Atomic Energy Agency. I met with them. What happened was those funds were sent to Hezbollah in Lebanon. They were sent to Hamas in Gaza. They were sent to the Houthis in Yemen. They go and spread terrorism every time they get a dollar. It doesn't go to the Iranian people. It does go to terrorist attacks. And Secretary Blinken's just wrong to imply that this money is not being moved around as we speak
and yet,
to
Ambassador,
hurt those that love freedom.
And yet, Ambassador, there's just no proof of that yet. This is just the hours after that immediate attack. Is it irresponsible to level that charge when you really don't have any evidence of that at this point in time?
The evidence is, look at what the Iranian people have done to freedom-loving people around the world. Look at what the Iranian people, the Iranian regime has done to threaten Israel over the years. To think that they're not moving money around is irresponsible to say that to the American people. They are moving money around to threaten those they hate. They hate Israel. They hate America. They are going to continue to use this. It was wrong to release the $6 billion, but let me tell you what else was wrong. It was wrong to go and have that debacle in Afghanistan. It was wrong to waive sanctions on Iran that gave them even more money. Money has been flowing to Iran, and that is the problem, because when Iran gets money, they use it for hate.
And Ambassador Haley, just to be clear again, the Secretary of State said categorically they have not seen a link. Let me move on, though, to your record on Israel. Under the Trump administration, the U.S. Embassy moved to Jerusalem. As you know, that enraged many Palestinians. Settlements expanded in violation of international law, and there was no progress made toward a two-state solution. You were UN ambassador at the time. Could you and should you have done more to address the interests of the Palestinian people?
Well, I actually went to the West Bank. I actually met with the Palestinians multiple times. I actually went and saw what the situation was at hand. But let me tell you what else I saw. I saw tunnels underneath Israel, underneath schools. What they would do in those tunnels is they would store arms, they would store ammunition, they would store things so that they could go and take that ammunition to hurt people across the border. They put these tunnels underneath schools because they knew that Israelis valued life. They knew that Israelis would not go and hurt innocent people. That's what we're dealing with. So I've been in those tunnels. I've seen what has happened. I've seen the graffiti all over those buildings that have tried to say that they want to kill as many Israelis
but Ambassador,
and Jews as they can.
Did you bear responsibility to do more to try to move toward a two-state solution while you had the chance to do so?
I called out the truth. I called out the truth that what was happening was that you had the entire world condemning a freedom-loving country that is a bright spot in a tough neighborhood. And the other truth I'll tell you, Kristen, is Americans need to remember, it's not that Israel needs America. America needs Israel. Israel is the front line of defense for the Iranian regime and terrorists that want to hurt us and want to hurt our friends. And we need to be honest with the American people about
Ambassador
that.
Haley, I want to turn to former President Trump.
And then Kristen Welker moves on to asking Nikki Haley about Trump's call to, or suggestion that former head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, should be executed for treason. And anyway, I thought of all the cross-examinations, especially of Republicans, that was the best one, certainly better than what Shannon Bream did with Mike Pompeo, never bringing up any of the things the Trump administration could have done better to avoid the Palestinian problem bubbling up into this Hamas surprise attack on Israel. And the Palestinian people certainly have a strong claim to being oppressed by the Israeli government, and especially the Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu. The right-wing government has done very little to try to come to the two-state solution that Kristen Welker was talking about. Is anyone even really working on a two-state solution where Palestinians get self-determinations in the West Bank and Gaza, or that's not really anything that came up on the Sunday shows, or very little of it. So that is the second to last clip on my main topic, and that's the last clip on this whole question of whether the Biden administration is responsible for this Hamas attack on Israel because of the money they gave to Iran, which was kind of a stupid talking point from Republicans, and I think got pretty much debunked by those last newsmaker clips and the good cross-examination from Kristen Welker. But this next clip is from CNN's State of the Union. I don't think Dana Bash did a really good job of cross-examining the Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, who really leaned into this 9/11 analogy that, like, the attack this weekend on Israel was Israel's 9/11. In fact, it was like 40 9/11s if you do the math that Ron Dermer talks about. But there's one thing he says in like the last minute of this 5-minute clip, like that I'll talk about after I show the clip, but just pay attention to where he like takes this 9/11 analogy to say that no one should question Israel's response because no one should have questioned the American response to 9/11, which I have some real problems with that, and Dana Bash doesn't even really follow up, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
What can you tell us about the current situation?
Well, we still have to make sure that all the terrorists, as you say, within our borders are taken care of. There were a number of fronts, and that's ongoing since this morning. We also had an attack from the north, as you mentioned, from Hezbollah. And we're in a very, very tense moment right now. We had a horrific attack, which I know that CNN and other stations have been reporting on for the last 24 hours yesterday. We have many, many hundreds, and the numbers, Dana, will keep going up. Just want to understand for the American people to understand what happened yesterday. We are well north of 600 people who have been killed. It will probably be more hundreds, several hundred more. Put that in American terms. Israel has a population of about 9 million people. America has a population of about 350 million people. It's about 40 times bigger than the Israeli population. So when you lose 1,000 people in Israel in one day, it's like 40,000 Americans being killed in one day. That's about 10 9/11s. That's what happened in Israel yesterday. The difference then, and I remember the feeling that I had as somebody born and raised in America on 9/11. That's the exact feeling I had yesterday as a minister in the Israeli government. The sense of shock, the sense of outrage, of utter disgust. I think that's what you see across Israel. There is a difference, Dana. Then your enemy was thousands of miles away. You had to send your troops thousands of miles away to deal with that. And you didn't know exactly where they were. You were looking for them in caves and mountains in Tora Bora and other places. Here we know exactly where our enemy is, and we're going to have to take action to exact such a massive price for them that every terror organization in Gaza, and frankly, every terror organization in the Middle East and around the world knows that this action is totally unacceptable, and that every civilized society, not just free societies, should stand with Israel. I'm very appreciative, and the Prime Minister is very appreciative of President Biden's clear statement yesterday. I just came from a conversation that they had just a few minutes ago. His unequivocal support. We've heard unequivocal support from many, many leaders around the world, particularly European leaders, and obviously the United States, bipartisan support in Congress. We hope that support will stay just as strong in the days ahead when we have to do what we have to do in order to restore security and also to exact such a massive price from this terror organization that they will rue this day. This was a very dark day for Israel. Tomorrow, Hamas, the period that's coming up, is going to be the darkest period in its history.
I'm going to certainly follow up on that and try to get a little bit more about what you mean and what that will look like. You talked, sir, about what you say are 600, more than 600 dead. What about the hostages? Let's start with Israeli hostages. Do you know how many there are at this point on the other side of the border in Gaza?
We don't have the exact number because we don't know exactly how many dead people who we're not in touch with. I think that will take several more hours to figure out the exact numbers, but I think it's scores of hostages. I can tell you there's also American hostages as part of that number as well. I don't want to get into a specific number, but these are women, they're children, they're elderly, they're Holocaust survivors. This is sick. It is a savage attack. And I would hope, I know that I didn't hear that coming from the United States, but I heard it coming from other countries around the world. This calls for de-escalation. Imagine that other countries would tell the American people after 9/11, after 10 9/11s, that they want de-escalation. Israel's going to have to do whatever it has to do to restore security. and make sure that no one will even think about doing something like this, a savage, brutal attack against civilization. Every single country should stand with Israel in these critical days. Because I have to tell you something, Dan, I've been through rounds of this before. I've been in media during rounds of this before. And I'm not accusing CNN of anything, and certainly not you of anything. But there have been times where the terrorists have used the media. When you see pictures of even the most effective terror action that we can take, we can target the terrorists all we want, but there will be civilian casualties. And then everybody turns and the terrorists are celebrating. Don't let this happen this time. We have to, all of us, all the civilized nations in the world have got to send a message to Hamas that what they did yesterday is not going to pay. They're going to lose from what they did yesterday. It's the most important thing. And I would ask for a call. I would ask for a call for every leader in the United States and elsewhere, a clear and unequivocal call to free the hostages. Free the hostages, full stop.
And I don't think anyone can disagree with a call to free the hostages, civilians who are being held by, terrorist guerrilla fighters from Hamas or whatever. And you saw Ron Dermer make the Israeli argument that they don't target civilians, that they target the leadership of Hamas, and the leadership of Hamas puts their infrastructure where there are civilians, and so they target the terrorists, but there's collateral damage which kills civilians, and Israeli attacks often kill civilians that way. U.S. attacks, where there are all these like drone strikes all over the world that are based on the authorization for use of military force that happened after 9/11. And that's the one thing I really wanted to comment on that Ron Dermer said. There may be some moral difference between the Hamas terrorists who go into Israel and specifically go after civilians at a music festival and gun down 260 people just listening to music, or go into homes and kidnap little kids and bring them back to Gaza. Is that morally worse than what Israel does when they attack these buildings in Gaza where the Hamas leadership is, but there are also hundreds of civilians there too, but they're not targeting the civilians, they're targeting the Hamas leadership, and the civilians are collateral damage. Honestly, if you study just war theory going all the way back to the Catholic Church and who is it, Justinian, or I can't even remember who was the first one who did just war theory, but there is supposedly a moral difference between targeting civilians in terms of terroristic actions and then targeting leadership and military targets, but then killing civilians as collateral damage. That one is supposedly better than the other, but if you're a civilian who's being killed, probably not much of a difference to you. So I saw that was kind of an argument going on in the live comments, whether there was a difference. And I think there is some difference, but a difference in intention, not a difference in results. And whether that's an important difference to you, you can let me know what you think in the comments section. But the other point I wanted to make about what Ron Dermer said, what was it? He was like, imagine that other countries would tell the American people after 9/11, after 10 9/11s, that they want de-escalation. That's what he said. And the thing is, when you react to an attack, when you react just as a single human being, not like a nation like the United States, but just as a human being, when you react to something with anger and violence, things usually don't turn out that well. Sometimes, I'm not a total pacifist. I think sometimes you do have to use violence in certain, self-defense, basically. But not anger and violence. You have to think about it, because what happened after 9/11? What Ron Dermer was talking about, no one should have said to America after 9/11, don't overreact, don't don't escalate. But what Osama bin Laden wanted to accomplish with the 9/11 attacks was to make the United States get more involved in the Middle East, to a war in Afghanistan that lasted like 20 years and ended with like the Taliban still in charge. And of course, then we did the invasion of Iraq, which, I mean, there's been like this bipartisan consensus almost. That's one of the things that happened with the Trump presidency. Like, Trump said that Bush was stupid, all of our wars in the Middle East were stupid, and that's kind of what the Democrats were saying. Not all of them, some of the Democrats like Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden voted for the Iraq war, but Barack Obama didn't, and that was sort of a consensus that occurred over time in the Democratic Party and maybe even in a lot of the Republican Party, that our reaction to 9/11 was not a good thing. It got us over-involved in wars in the Middle East, and Afghanistan didn't end well, and the Iraq War didn't end well. And so what Ron Dermer was saying there, no one should tell Israel not to overreact. Well, maybe what Hamas wants is for Israel to overreact and end up killing so many Palestinian civilians that they get a lot of international condemnation, which, if you kill civilians, even if you're not targeting them, it may not be technically terrorism, but it's not a good thing. It's not a good outcome, and it maybe not really the smartest. If you want to use violence in an intelligent way, not in an angry way. That's the point I was trying to make there. You can let me know what you think about that point in the comment section. And I'm going to finish the main topic here and now move on to my final newsmaker clip, which is on what would have been the big topic if this Hamas attack on Israel hadn't happened over the weekend, which was the ousting of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. And now this week, the Republicans maybe are going to find a new Speaker of the House. There are two candidates right now, Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan, neither of whom are really great from the perspective of a registered Democrat like me. But this next clip, Nancy Mace, who's supposedly a Republican moderate, talking to Margaret Brennan on CBS News' Face the Nation, where Margaret Brennan is like trying to get her to say that Steve Scalise is too far right because he, according to the standards of CBS News, is an election denier. And then Nancy Mace comes out and says, well, I'm actually going to endorse Jim Jordan for Speaker of the House. And remember, Nancy Mace is supposedly a moderate and not an election denier. And then Margaret Brennan, to her credit, follows up on problems with Jim Jordan. He's both, I kind of like to say in this clip, he's, Jim Jordan is soft on raping and pillaging. The pillaging of the Capitol on January 6th, he was soft on condemning that. And then, of course, the sexual abuse of wrestling, of people who were in the wrestling program at Ohio State when Jim Jordan was there. He didn't actually sexually abuse anyone, but he was soft on sexual abuse because he kind of covered it up or didn't report what he heard. And apparently Nancy Mace has never heard of that. So she doesn't care that the person she's endorsing for Speaker of the House is soft on pillaging and soft on rape. Soft on raping and pillaging, that seems to be, I guess, the new standard for a Republican Speaker of the House. You can let me know what you think after we watch that final clip together over here.
We were talking about the two candidates for Speaker who have put themselves forward. You voted to certify the 2020 election. Steve Scalise did not. By CBS standards, that makes him an election denier. Is that disqualifying for you?
Well, with both of the candidates, there are going to be issues that we agree on and disagree on. That's the way it would be with any speaker. Yeah, well, with any speaker. But I will tell you today, I'm going to be supporting Jim Jordan for Speaker for a number of reasons. I think that his values, his work ethic, his ability to just run circles around everyone with regards to policy and pushing forward. We've been one of the least productive Congresses inside of 30 years, and he's going to be a workhorse for our country. And I'm really looking forward to rolling up our sleeves this week, no matter how this shakes out, and working hard for the American people, because we've got to to stand up for the people. We've got to put the American people first and move this country forward and do it in a positive way. And I think he's going to bring that to the table.
Well, let me ask you about Jim Jordan, because former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who, as you know, was one of the lead investigators on the January 6th committee, warned Republicans against making him Speaker of the House. Listen.
Jim Jordan knew more about what Donald Trump had planned for January 6th than any other member of the House of Representatives. And if the Republicans decide that Jim Jordan should be the Speaker of the House, there would no longer be any possible way to argue that a group of elected Republicans could be counted on to defend the Constitution.
That is a chilling statement. Does it give you any pause?
Well, again, there are going to be all sorts of issues that we agree on and disagree on. And also in terms of January 6th, the Electoral College, et cetera, I was one of the most vocal members of our party that day and the days and weeks beyond that. I got primaried because of my vote to certify, because I spoke out. And so, you know, we have to look forward and unite and come together regardless of what has happened in the past. We have to be forward thinking and look to the future to bring the party together, bring the people together, and let the American people know that we care and we're going to work and fight hard for them.
I know you've been outspoken about defending victims of sexual assault due to the past allegations against Jim Jordan that he turned a blind eye to sexual abuse. Give you any reservations?
I'm not familiar or aware with that. He's not indicted on anything that I'm aware of, and so I don't know anything and can't speak to that. But I will say that I have been, as you said, Margaret, a very I don't know anything, and I don't know anything about that. What I do know is that I've been a very strong voice for women. I've talked to Jim Jordan and Steve Scalise about that. I've been a very strong advocate for rape victims. As you mentioned earlier, the Judiciary Committee, with him as chairman, recently passed a rape kit bill that Barbara Lee and I are working on. And those are the facts and the data that I have to work with, and I've had a very positive experience with him in that regard.
Oh, she's working on a rape kit law with Barbara Lee. Actually, Barbara Lee is the one member of Congress who voted against the war in Afghanistan, not to mention the war in Iraq, but she was the one. Now she's running for Senate in California, and that's one of her bona fides is even back after 9/11, she was like the one person in Congress who didn't overreact with this huge authorization for use of military force that is still in effect and still being used to drone attack people all over the world. But anyway, I don't think I oversold that clip. I think she definitely did come out in favor of Jim Jordan, even if he's soft on raping and soft on pillaging. Well, I mean, she said the whole like overthrowing democracy thing was just like a policy disagreement she has with Jim Jordan, which is kind of ridiculous. And then when it came to the allegations at Ohio State, I haven't heard that. I don't know anything about that. He hasn't been indicted on anything. Is that like the new standard? There's no scandal unless you've been indicted. Well, of course, for the Republicans, you can be indicted in 4 different jurisdictions and still be the leading candidate for nomination from your party. And anyway, now I'm going to go into the whole... I'm not going to go and talk about Trump. That was one of the great things about this time. We had very little talk about Trump today. I mean, I did talk a little bit about the responsibility of the Trump administration for not solving the Palestinian problem, although they're not the only administration who didn't solve it. So... there's that. But anyway, that was the last of my Newsmaker clips. I appreciate all of you who showed up for the live stream. I appreciate my recorded show viewers. I noticed that YouTube has demonetized this video, probably because it has like footage of war and conflict and not good for advertisers. So whatever, if you want me to keep doing these live streams, even when I get demonetized, down in the video description, right under the video, there's a link to my Patreon page to PayPal contributions. That's a good way to support this if you want me to keep doing it. Whether you support me or not, I promise to keep doing this Monday Media Mix-Up all the way through January 2025 when we figure out whether there's going to be a continuation of the Biden administration or a peaceful transition of power to the Trump administration or who knows what. But anyway, I will be back next Monday and every Monday all the way through January 2025. I hope you appreciate the time and effort I put into this Monday show every week, 10 to 12 hours of my time that you might want to compensate me for, like I said, with those links. Otherwise, just give me the supportive comments, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. I will be back next Monday, every Monday. Sometimes I have some other reason to upload a video. Otherwise, I will be seeing you at the next Monday Media Mix-Up. And until then, I guess I'll just be seeing all of you around the internet.